Okay, so what if I told you that the tech billionaires we see everywhere today are basically just a reboot of the ruthless monopolists from the 19th century? It sounds kind of crazy, but today we're going to dig into the idea of the new robber barons and how history might be repeating itself, like right now, right in front of us. Let's just start with a number. A number that is so big it's almost meaningless. $6 trillion. That is a 6 followed by 12 zeros. It's the rough net worth of just a few hundred American billionaires. That's a concentration of wealth that's bigger than the entire economies of most countries on Earth.
And how we see these guys, people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, is completely split. One minute they're being praised as these world-changing geniuses. The next, they're literally being accused of having blood on their hands. So what is it? Are they saviors or are they destroyers? Look, this isn't just about whether these guys are good or bad people. It's about the entire system that lets this kind of wealth and power even exist. So the real question is, how did we get here? And that's what we're going to figure out.
To really get what's happening now, we have to rewind. We have to go way back. Because the blueprint for today's billionaires, it was drawn up in the late 1800s by the original robber barons.
So what even is a robber baron? The name itself is pretty intense. It actually comes from these medieval German lords who would just block rivers and charge illegal tolls to anyone who wanted to pass. In the 19th century, people started using it for a new kind of royalty, the industrialists who built massive empires by, crushing anyone who got in their way, exploiting their workers, and basically rewriting the rules of the entire game.
And this is where it gets really complicated, because these guys lived a total double life. You have Andrew Carnegie, the guy who funded thousands of public libraries. A hero, right? Well, he was also the guy who hired private security to violently crush a strike, which left 10 people dead. Or John D. Rockefeller, who founded the University of Chicago while paying his workers so little that it was basically a death sentence. They were philanthropists and exploiters at the exact same time. And that contradiction is everything. Carnegie was so good at this, he even came up with a moral justification for it all. He wrote this thing called The Gospel of Wealth, where he said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." I mean, it was an absolute stroke of public relations genius. It was a way to clean up a reputation that was built on the backs of a whole lot of suffering people.
But that era of just unchecked greed, it didn't last forever. The public eventually got sick of the massive inequality, and a huge wave of labor movements, journalism, and political reforms kicked off a period that economists now call the Great Compression. This one chart pretty much tells the story of the 20th century in America. See that first bar? Right before the Great Depression, the top 1% took home about a quarter of all the income in the country. Then, after decades of reforms, it dropped to less than 10%. But just look at where we are now. The U-curve is complete. We are right back to the insane levels of inequality we saw in the Gilded Age. So, what happened in the middle of that U? How did we bend the curve? Well, the government stepped in, big time. The New Deal created a social safety net. Taxes on the richest Americans went up, way up, as high as 94%. This wasn't about punishing success. It was about investing back into the country. And you know what? It worked. The result was the creation of the American middle class. We saw widespread prosperity. People could actually afford to buy homes, and college was cheap.
I mean, think about it. For almost half a century, the top tax rate was 70% or higher. That was just a totally different social contract. The idea was that everyone had to chip in, especially those who had the most. And in that kind of environment, it was just physically impossible to build up the kind of crazy fortunes that we see today.
But of course, that era ended, that social contract got torn up, and the cycle of inequality started all over again. And with it came a whole new breed of billionaire.
And the change wasn't gradual. It was an explosion. In 1982, there were only 13 billionaires on the Forbes 400 list. Just 8 years later, in 1990, that number was 66. And today, over 800. That's more than a 60-fold increase in just 40 years. It's wild.
But this new wave of billionaires had much, much better PR. The old money was built on stuff you could see and touch. Oil, steel, railroads. It felt kind of dirty, heavy, and, well, violent. The new money was built on ideas, computers, the internet, social media. It was pitched as clean, innovative, even a little rebellious.
This quote just nails it. The new tech founders weren't seen as greedy old monopolists. No, they were visionaries, anti-establishment geniuses,
Hackers, misfits, nerds. The whole aesthetic of being rich was completely rebranded for a new generation.
And that brings us right up to our current moment, and to the pretty uncomfortable truth about the deal we've all made in this new digital Gilded Age.
So what's this deal exactly? Well, on one side, we get all this incredible stuff, and a lot of it's free. Instant communication with anyone on Earth, unlimited entertainment, free GPS. But what's the real price of free? Well, we pay with our attention, which gets sold to advertisers. We pay with our personal data, which is used to influence us. And more, it seems like we're paying with our mental health.
And over the last decade or so, that shiny, utopian mask of big tech, well, it started to slip. The Cambridge Analytica scandal showed us that our data wasn't just being collected, it was being weaponized. We heard about the sweatshop-like conditions in Amazon warehouses, and we saw Facebook's own research admit what we all kind of suspected. Its algorithms are built to push hate and division because it keeps us glued to the screen.
And that really gets to the heart of the argument here. The old barons, they exploited our bodies. They built their fortunes on our physical labor. The new barons, they found a brand new resource to mine, our minds. They exploit our psychology, our attention, our very consciousness.
And while this whole new digital economy was making a new class of billionaires, what was happening to everybody else? Well, for millions of people, the road to a stable, middle-class life just started to vanish. Wages stayed flat, but the cost of everything, housing, healthcare, education, it just soared. The American dream was slowly being replaced by the reality of just trying to get by.
I mean, just look at this statistic. In 1982, sending your kid to college for a year cost about 4% of the average family's income. Today, it's 24%. That is a six-fold jump. The basic building blocks of a normal life have turned into luxury items.
And this new economic reality created a whole new mindset to go with it. Hustle culture. You know the vibe. It's this idea that your worth is tied to your productivity, that you should always be working, always optimizing. It's actually the perfect ideology for a new Gilded Age, where having a normal job just isn't enough to feel secure anymore.
So here we are again, back where we started. After the Great Depression, we actually built a more fair society. We regulated the economy, we taxed the rich, and we created a shared prosperity that lasted for generations. We learned our lesson, and then somehow we just forgot it. We let the exact same cycle of extreme inequality happen all over again.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question for the future. The old barons took our labor. The new ones have taken our minds. As we head into an age of AI and even bigger technological change, what's going to be the next thing to be mined and sold? And maybe more importantly, what will we as a society finally decide is just too valuable to put a price on?